So I said, well, I don't want to join the Army. And I said, I better join the Navy. I figure if I went in the Army, I'd have to live in a foxhole someday, and I didn't want to live in a foxhole. I figured going into the Navy would be, I'd get 3 squares and have a bunk to sleep in, which I guess I was young there, but I still had that much foresight. And so I joined the Navy. At that time, I was really intent on joining the military because I wanted to serve my country. I felt that now that I look back on it, if I at that time found any reason that I didn't want to serve my country just through my own, my own desire, or my own outlook, I think today I couldn't live with myself knowing that I didn't do my part. So in 1943 there, I went to boot training at the U.S. Naval Base in Sampson, New York. And after 2 months of boot training, I had to decide what specialty I wanted to go into. And at that time, they counsel you a little, but I still couldn't make a decision. And finally, I guess I had, excuse me, I had some desire to go into aviation radio. And I went through the tests again, and they said, you're colorblind, so they wouldn't take me. So out of the clear blue, I said, gee, I don't know. I think I'll go into the medical corps. And they were very receptive. They were looking for people to volunteer, I guess, into the medical corps. And I went to hospital corps school in Portsmouth, Virginia for 2 months. After that, I was transferred to the U.S. Naval Hospital in Chelsea, Massachusetts as a corpsman. And I was up there for about 3 months. And in December of 1943, I looked on the bulletin board, and there was a notice that I was being transferred to the Fleet Marine Force in San Diego, California. And I said, what is the Fleet Marine Force? I had some knowledge of it, but I was, I guess it was a big shock. So we took a train from Boston, and we went cross country to San Diego. And there we were assigned to the Field Medical Service School. When I arrived in San Diego with about a group of 12 guys, we were met by a Marine captain, and he introduced himself, and he said welcome, and he said one of the first things he says, take all your Navy clothes and send them home. He says, we're going to give you a Marine issue. And brought us over, gave us a Marine issue, and I said, oh my God, I says, I'm a Marine. So went to this Field Medical Service School for 2 months, and there there was a lot of marching, a lot of class work, and they're just getting familiar with a corpsman's responsibility being attached to a Marine Corps unit. We also got training in the use of short arms, carbine, 30 millimeter, or 30 caliber, I'm sorry, the 30 caliber and the 45 pistols. After 2 months of Field Medical Service School, we were assigned to a new Marine division that was being formed, the 5th Marine Division. And we were transferred to the Camp Pendleton in California. I was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 28th Marines. We they didn't have extensive quarters, so they assigned us to a tent camp there on the outside of Camp Pendleton, and we lived in a tent, but we had a cot and everything, so it was comfortable. We trained there at Camp Pendleton for about 8 months, and in October of 1944, we got on they put us on a ship in San Diego and shipped us out to Hawaii. The time in California was all training. It was a lot of marching, forced marches and everything. We did a lot of beach landing there from Higgins boats, and it was a complete training with a Marine unit. In California, the time was good in a way. We were able to go on Liberty up to Hollywood, and that was a break for us. So in October there, we shipped out of San Diego, and we went to Hilo, Hawaii, and there they transferred us to a camp in Hawaii on the Big Island there. It was Camp Tarawa, and there the 2nd Marine Division had been there previously, and we occupied those quarters. So we trained there at Camp Tarawa for 4 months, and there was a lot of, again, marching, forced marches, and all field exercises and landings from Higgins boats and amphibious Amtraks too. So we in January, about mid-January of 1945, we were put on troop ships, and they said we're going out somewhere out in the Pacific, and we went to Pearl Harbor, and they didn't tell us where we were going, but they did stop at Pearl Harbor, and we had a couple hours liberty, got back on the ship, and we took off. And as soon as we got out there, they said, pulled out all the maps and said, we're going to participate in the Battle of Iwo Jima. We got to capture that island from the Japanese. It was, and everybody said, "Where is Iwo Jima?" Yeah, that was completely new, Boy. So the map showed it naturally. They said this was an important island for us to capture, because it was halfway between Guam and Saipan, where the B-29s took off to bomb Japan, and the Japs had an airstrip, or a couple of airstrips there on Iwo, and they'd send fighters up to intercept the bombers. And then on the way back, the B-29, some of them were crippled, and they had to be ditched. And by having Iwo there was a place for these bombers to land and save some of the airmen. So they said it was a very very strategic island, and they said it's going to be a 3-day battle. So we said, great, so we were all apprehensive. We had a very good division. We had a lot of veterans from the other divisions that had been in action. Guys from Guadalcanal and Tarawa, the Marshals, Guam, Saipan, Tinian. So the nucleus of our division was veterans who were able to really, help the recruits. And but as I was saying, we took off. We were at sea there, and we went to to Guam, and there we did some maneuvers in Guam. Now this took quite a while. You know, we were in a convoy with other ships, and at Guam there, we had landings and everything, and then it was February the 17th. We were transferred. This 1st Battalion, 28th Marines, we were transferred to LSTs because we were going to be the assault battalion. And our objective was going to be Green Beach 1 in the landings. There were 7 landing beaches. Each beach is about 200 yards. And we were in Green Beach 1, which was the closest beach to Mount Suribachi. Now our objective was to cut across the island and at the real narrowest point there, and then sweep towards Suribachi and capture Suribachi, because it was such a strategic point for the Japanese defense of the island. Well, we were on the we left Guam there on the LSTs, and they said we would be landing in amphibious Amtraks, and so we got let's say it was a couple of nights. I guess it actually was we were about 2 days at sea there, and we would sleep on the deck there because it was just more comfortable. There weren't too many bunks down below there. But then the last night they said everybody has to go down below, you know, the night before we arrived at Iwo. And then it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and you know, they got us up there and gave us the breakfast, and the great breakfast was steak and eggs, you know, the last, and we had our breakfast, and then we loaded into the Amtraks, and then the LST opens up, and we just go into the drink, and we went out there. Let's see, H hour was 9 o'clock. We were out there about 6 o'clock. So we were about 3 hours just rendezvousing, you know. And I was in the 4th wave of troops. The first wave was amphibious Amtraks with sawed-off 75 millimeter guns. No troops in them. And then the second, all the succeeding waves had troops in them, and there were four waves of amphibious Amtraks for our battalion. And then behind us was the 2nd Battalion, which was they were in Higgins boats. And but as we approached, there was the Navy was firing. You know, they were bombarding the island, and their planes were bombing the mountain, and there was just you know, complete you know, not chaos, but a complete activity going on. You know, so we finally got to the island, and it was quiet as far as any gunfire or any return fire from the Japanese. They weren't firing back because they were down there in their caves and the tunnels, you know, because we said that there were no Japs on Iwo. They were in Iwo. They were all underground there in there, because the defenses of that island by this General Kobayashi really designed a very sophisticated defense system where they're all interconnecting tunnels. They didn't have to come to the surface, you know. They just they stood underground. They got pounded by a bombardment for, you know, months there that the Navy bombed them, and they we went in, we landed, and the back ramp of my Amtrak, the Amtrak I was in, lowered, and we hit the beach there, and the big surprise was this coral sand that we encountered. It was all coral sand there on the beach. So we just kept, well, we might have went in about 100 yards. And there, initially there was no return fire from the Japanese because the Navy was providing this rolling barrage. That was a barrage that these battleships and cruisers were providing, which just preceded the first line of amphibious Amtraks. So it was supposed to help. But once the Amtraks got in sort of short distance there, the rolling barrage had to stop because there was a danger of hitting our own troops. And soon as that rolling barrage stopped, then the Japs started to open up. They right from Mount Suribachi there, they started to fire, and they had, you know, a real sophisticated defense design for the island. And as I said, we must have went in about 100 yards, and then you hit the deck there, and you try to. We were trying to dig foxholes, and you couldn't dig much of a foxhole because of this coral sand. It was just like coffee ground, you know. And so we, you know, you tried to dig a foxhole with your hands, you know, and try to get as low as you can. And it was, you know, just about impossible. You just had to try to hug the ground and pray, you know. And we were at a standstill there after there wasn't much, we weren't able to advance much at all. And after a couple hours, we were getting really pounded bad. Mortars were lighting all over the place, and you could see in the sand there that they were firing away at us, and you could see the bullets hitting the sand. And mortar went off behind me, and I got hit in the back. And luckily, I was hit by a piece of shrapnel about the size of a silver dollar. And but it was just a superficial wound, and I was lucky. Put what do you call it, a battle dressing on it, and I was able to continue, and I continued there for the next 36 days. I was fortunate, and but as far as being able to advance, it was very slow going across that island, and because the Japs had all kinds of pillboxes and caves, and they just their guns would come out, and they'd fire, and then they'd retract them, and they just you know, they just continued. They were really zeroed in on all the spots on the island, in fact. So well, the first night was pretty quiet, but they were doing a lot of pounding from the north there. You could hear those cannons they had that were whistling. We called it a washing machine or something of that nature, and it was scary, you know. But we did cross the island there on the second day, and then we were relieved by the 2nd Battalion, and the progress was very slow, you know. Sometimes they wouldn't be able to, in a whole day, they wouldn't be able to move because they were just pinned down, and the losses were, well, you know, they were really bad. And we...
when you say you were relieved, what did you do? What did your group do after you were
we retracted maybe, you know, a couple hundred yards, and we had a bivouac area, you know.
Okay.
And so then the 2nd Battalion was on the line there, and then the 5th day, they just kept moving forward, but the progress was slow, you know. But the 5th day, they sent a patrol up the mountain, and a 40-man patrol to secure the mountain. And wipe out any Japs. And it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was at the foot of Mount Suribachi in a foxhole with my buddy, and we were just waiting, and they all of a sudden we heard, there were the 800 ships in that invasion armada, that they started blowing their horns and sirens and whistles. And so I said to my buddy, "Hey, Joe, what's going on?" Jesus. And he said, "I don't know." He says, so we looked up there, and there was that beautiful flag flying. They raised the flag, and the ships, were really. I don't know if it was the first flag or the second. I think it was the second flag. Yeah, but there, the sequence of that flag raising was, disputed, and so I said to Joe, I said, "Gee," I said, "the battle's over." I said, "Man," I said, "Well, I was there 31 more days, So we went back to another bivouac area, and about 3 days later, we had to relieve one of the battalions that was on the line, and we just kept on plowing our way up there, and it was awful. The terrain was bad. There were all these caves, and there was a quarry there, and there were some hills that were good observation points, for the Japanese, and but it lasted, 36 days, and we lost 6,821 Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Coast Guard too. So that last day, we were in a bivouac area, and we were getting ready to go down to the beach there and get back on the ships. Well, that night, the Japanese staged a what do you call it, a banzai attack, and that was the first banzai attack they made on Iwo. Previous campaigns, previous battles, they'd have a lot of these banzai attacks. They get all hepped up there with their sake, and then they charge and try to disrupt and kill, create chaos. But on Iwo, they were dug down there in their caves. The only time they came up was when they wanted to attack or anything. But apparently, at the very end there, to about 200 of them, and they went down through the Air Force bivouac area, and they killed about 40 airmen. And the Japs had to. The Marines had to wipe them out then, and but that was their last hurrah there.
Now you went ashore with a company, right?
Right. Headquarters. I was with Headquarters Company.
And how many men went ashore in that company about?
There were about 200.
And how many got off?
Oh, I would say about 40. Yeah. About 40. Yeah.
Do you remember the company commander's name?
Yeah, I remember the company, the commanders in the rifle companies there. But
that's okay. Well, and
there was let's see, in the A company there was Captain Rice or Captain Parsons. B company was Captain Mears, M-E-A-R-S, and Captain Rice was in C company.
And so each day you're trying to inch forward, and your job is to take care of the guys that have been shot. Right.
We take care of the guys that were shot, wounded in any way.
Why don't you describe, you come across somebody that's been wounded, what was your procedures from there?
Well, when I landed, I'd say within the first hour, we were getting pounded, and somebody yelled "Corpsman," so I heard it was in my within my hearing, so I ran because they signaled, and there was a guy who was hit in the upper leg with shrapnel. With shrapnel, and it was bad. And so gave him a shot of morphine and put a tourniquet on and a battle dressing. And they got the stretcher bearers there to take him back to the beach there. And but the guy was, was just about out of it, and it was I was just startled, when you see something like that.
That was the first wounded man you'd seen.
That was the first wounded man I'd seen.
And
yeah.
Treated.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would guess there were many more.
After that, there were more. Yeah. They were.
Did you have good support in terms of getting them from
the
where they're wounded to the beach, and then from the beach back to the ships?
Yeah, well, they would go from where they were wounded. They would go to the what do you call it, battalion aid station.
Okay.
And there they would be the preliminary whatever they could do for them, and then they would go to regimental, and then they would go to division. Now, with all the chaos and everything, especially that beach was jammed with equipment and men coming in and wounded and men that were killed. That I guess they were taking them really from the battalion directly to the beach, not going through the regimental or division, because it was just it wasn't practical. So we after the Japanese had staged that banzai attack, we went down to the cemetery, the 5th Marine Division Cemetery, and just for a service there to the ones that we had left behind there. And in the 5th Marine Division, out of the 6,821 that did die in the battle, I would say we had about 2,500. That we lost about 2,500. But the wounded were really, so many men were getting killed or wounded that we were getting replacements during the battle. And these Marine Corps replacements from the replacement depot, and they'd come in, and it was just some of them wouldn't last long because the action was so intense. They just sometimes you ask where's so and so, or somebody you knew, and they were gone one way or another. So we got back onto the ship, onto the troop ship there, and we went back to Hilo and back to Camp Tarawa, and we were preparing to for the invasion of Japan, which was going to be there, I guess, in the latter part of the year, and we had a big infusion of replacements naturally to fill in the ranks, and after I'd say 2 or 3 months there, I had applied for officers training in ROTC, and I was accepted. And in June, I think it was June of 1945, I was transferred back to the United States, and I was assigned to an ROTC at Ohio State University, and I was there for about 4 or 5 months, and they gave us an option there to get discharged, and I decided to get discharged.
back to Iwo Jima for a few minutes.
Sure.
What sort of food did you have?
We had K rations. That was the the big item. But there were the 10-in-1s. They had this what they called a 10-in-1 ration, and that had a good variety of stuff. And if you did have a chance to heat some of that stuff, it wasn't too bad. Mm-hmm. Now you could, since Iwo was a sulfur island, they had if you dug down in some of that sand, there would be sulfur fumes emitting. Yeah, and you dig down maybe about 8-10 inches, and there was sulfur fumes were coming out of the sand. So you put the K rations or the 10-in-1s in there just to heat them up, and they would heat. So that made it a little better, And
in the 36 days, how many days were you on the line, would you say?
I would say I was on the line about 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would have been about enough.
Yeah.
So your unit didn't participate then in Okinawa. It was just, your participation was Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima, right? Yeah.
Your buddy Joe, I want to get his name.
My buddy Joe?
Yeah.
Nixdorf, Nixdorf.
And did he make it?
He made it, yep. Yeah.
Do you're obviously, you attend the reunions, and have you been back to Iwo Jima?
Yes, I've been back to Iwo Jima. I went back there in 1995 for the first time. That was the 50th anniversary. And there's military historical tours out of Arlington, Virginia. They conduct trips to different battlefields all over the world. And they're headed up by a Marine lieutenant colonel and a colonel, I believe. And so I heard about them, and I decided to go. And what we did was we flew to Pearl Harbor, and from Pearl Harbor to Guam, and we stayed at Guam. And then one day we flew up to Iwo, 727th, and we landed. We landed at the airstrip there, and they had about 300 Marines from Okinawa come down, and with trucks and everything to provide transportation, etc. And they gave us a big reception, all the survivors, and But when we were approaching Iwo in the plane, I had left the island there in '45, and it was completely barren. There was nothing, because we had bombed the dickens out of it, We looked out of the plane. The pilot said, we're approaching now. So he said, you want to take a peek at it? Looked out there, and I was flabbergasted. It was all that greenery, all that stuff. Everything grew back again. But we got there, we landed, and these Marines, they just couldn't stop talking to you. They wanted to talk to you, and because we're talking to a sergeant there, he says, we pound into these guys, these new recruits, that they have to follow in your footsteps. And they just were so eager, I went back again in 2000, and I said to myself, I got to do something special. So we landed and went through the whole procedure there, landed on at the airport and went into the hangar there, and the Marines surround you and everything, and there was about a half a dozen of them, and then I see a woman there, and she has a star on her shoulder, Brigadier General, and I said, General, I says, I would, I'd like to run up Mount Suribachi in honor of the 6,821 that we left behind. I said, do you see any problem? And she said, oh no. She said, yeah, I see you're a runner. I had Marine Corps t-shirt on. So, then all of a sudden one of the Marines said, sir, he says, I would like to run up Mount Suribachi with you too. I says, okay. I said, no problem. This was about 11 o'clock in the morning. And he says, sir, he says, I have 2 sergeants, and I know they'll want to run up with you too. And he said, will it be okay for them? And I said, certainly. I said, good. So we arranged to meet at the foot of Mount Suribachi at 2 o'clock. And I got there, and they came in a truck, and they had, all their regular gear on, So I said, you guys gonna run up with us? Oh yeah, we're gonna run up there, no problem. I had brought my singlet and shorts and running shoes and everything, so I was all set. So and so we ran up Mount Suribachi there. It's all paved all the way up to the top there. The CBs, they were the greatest, the CBs, and the work they did. We got up to the top of Mount Suribachi there, and pictures and everything, and then they said, okay, let's run down again, and we ran down and went back to the hangar.
How many miles was that?
Oh, well, that I would say it's about a quarter of a mile the way it circles, it spirals around and going up there. So it might be, about a quarter and a half a mile, But it's up, it's a climb,
Did it bring back vivid memories when you got there, or was it so much different that you?
It was so much different, yeah, than that I remember. But it still brings back memories, and even now when I get together with some of the buddies, survivors, and we have recollections of the experiences we had there.
What is your sharpest memory of the 36 days?
I think a couple. One of them is that first casualty that I encountered. I was and it was such a it was a shock in a way, because I was just startled. I was young, 18 years. Well, no, I was 20. I was 20 when we landed there. And another really, and it was. I think about it. I laugh a little. We had what they called a Jeep ambulance. And that was just a Jeep that had a rack on it where they could put 2 stretchers. And so the doctor said, why don't you go down to the supply section down there and get some supplies. So I went down there, and we had a Jeep driver, so I was just riding along there, and we got some stuff and came back. And on the way back, the driver knew where to go. I felt he knew where to go, but we must have got off the track a little. So all of a sudden he speeds up, and they're shooting at us. So he takes off of that Jeep. He goes flying, and I said, "Oh my God!" After we got to our area, and we must have been maybe I don't know. We must have been close to the front lines, or beyond the front lines, and we luckily got back. He's shooting at me. I said, "Man, That was a recollection. In a way, it was funny because I was that moving target, or we were that moving target. Yeah.
Did you? What was the chain of command? You were assigned to the Marine Corps, but were there Navy doctors that you reported to on the medical side?
Yeah, we had 2 doctors. All right, we had what they called a battalion surgeon and an assistant battalion surgeon. And then in the battalion there was 1,000 Marines, and there were 40 corpsmen. Each company had 10 corpsmen, and there was headquarters company and A, B, and C companies that each had 10. So that was 40.
Did you have to participate in the combat? I mean, in terms of actually shooting at people, or were you too busy with the...
No, I was busy. I never did shoot. I had my carbine, and then I got a .45 too. I picked it up, and I was just in case I had to defend myself, I was ready, but I never did have to shoot.
When you got home, did you have what they call today the post-traumatic stress, nightmares and things like that?
Some, but not really extensive, But even, as the years go by, it's still there, very vivid,
What did you think of your commanding officers, the chain of command? Were they competent, above average? How would you rate them?
Well, we had battalion commander, lieutenant colonel. He didn't overly impress, but his company commanders were, I thought, above average, very, very good. And we lost some of those company commanders, and
platoon commanders must have been cheap too.
Oh, they were, yeah. Boy, I remember they come up as replacements, as I was saying before, and they wouldn't last long, because the toll was so high.
Have you seen the 2 movies, Letters from Iwo Jima, and I forget the other one? They were...
What do you call it? Flags of Our Fathers. Yes, I did.
Are they realistic to any degree?
Semi,
How did you get word that you were going to be leaving the island? Was the battle over, or?
Well, the island was declared secure on March 16.
And so you left
10 days later. Well, because there was so much mopping up to do. There were so many caves that had to be sealed. We'll put C2 charges in and seal them, or burn them out with tanks and hand flamethrowers. That it was just they just never seemed to end,
How many Japanese troops were on there? Was that ever determined?
They claimed about 22,000. Yeah.
After you got home, you were at Ohio State, and then you decided to take
my discharge, right? Yeah.
What did you do after that?
I worked for a year, and I tried to get in a tool shop. I had desire, but it wasn't very strong, to become a tool maker, tool and die maker, and this was in in the 40s, late 40s. So I said to the boss, I said, how about a nickel raise? And I think, I was making 70 cents an hour. And I was, oh, he says, oh, geez, Phil, he says, things are tough. I said, okay, John, I said, okay. So I said, I understand. And then I looked in the mirror and I said, geez, what are you doing? I said, you better go to school. So I decided to go to college, and I went to Fairfield University. And I graduated in the first graduating class, 1951. And so I was a pioneer there. And I worked for a while in the post office, a temporary job. I didn't have much, jobs weren't too plentiful. So then I did get a job with the Olin Matheson in New Haven, and I worked there 5 years. That was a research lab for cellophane and polyethylene. And then I got an opportunity to get a job with Monsanto in the plastics. And I decided to move here to Deep River, or to Westbrook, and work up in Deep River. And I did that for 34 years, and I enjoyed it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And you went to school in the GI Bill, I assume.
I went on the GI Bill, yeah, and that was really that was a bonanza there, What was it, $500 a year or something they give you? I forgot what the numbers were.
One of the questions here is, did your service experience affect your life?
Well, I think I would say it affected my life in as much as I appreciate and I was thankful that I did survive, And but I was very proud that I was able to serve my country, and I would have, it would have been devastating if when I look back, if I didn't do my duty, and I'm proud too of the fact that I did serve, and because I really today I support the troops. I'm very supportive, and somebody sometimes comes up to me and says, thank you for your service to our country. I said, yeah. I said, I support the troops today too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
I don't know. I've been talking for quite a while, right? Yeah.
Quite a story.
Yeah. I try to cover, all parts of it. Some of them are a little humorous too, I enjoyed the liberties in California there. And I thought I was going to, when you're young, and you're romantic, you said, gee, maybe I should move to California, but my mom there, and I think that would have devastated her if I said, I want to move to California at that time, Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that wraps it up.
Okay, Bob.